we're always trying to solve for this external perception, how consumers perceive us. Is that the problem, really? Like, we keep trying to get a better campaign, doing better work on tracking these campaigns. Or is the problem this external perception truly, or is it, in fact, our internal standards, our internal board, the standard of how easy it is to get into these kind of standards that we've kind of come to know as normal. And obviously, if it's not easy to get in, there's either a higher due or a lot less members. And so is it our own internal standards that's the biggest problem in your view? Or is it this external perception that consumers have?
I think that
if you're not getting educated about local and national real estate market conditions, issues within the industry, or trends that are happening inside the business, you're doing yourself and your client base a disservice. This is the Knowledge Brokers Podcast. I'm Tom Toole, here with Byron Lazine, and we've got special guest, NAR Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, Bennett Richardson. Bennett, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you jumping on here. I'm going to kick it to Byron because he's been talking a lot about NAR, doing a lot of inspection here, and we can kind of obviously want to just thank you for being here, number one, and Byron's going to kind of take the lead on this. So take it away, my friend.
Sounds great, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Bennett, we really do appreciate your time. It's interesting how, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes here just to give your background, because I do think everybody listening should understand your background. I mean, you're really seasoned in public affairs and media and marketing and communication. So I'm going to give you a chance to just kind of update everybody quickly on the background, and then we're going to get into it. But you and I got connected on a pretty funny story. We're in a room of about 100 people in Park City. I won't give too much details because we all signed or I don't know if you did, but we all signed an NDA.
Yeah, we definitely had to sign NDA
inside of that room. And you were doing a panel with another NAR exec. And, I kind of rudely injected myself maybe into the conversation because I'm sitting there and it was like everything that was wrong in the history, and you're trying to change the future of NAR. And to me, it was just like the whole conversation, an NAR exec interviewing another NAR exec, was everything that was wrong with the history. It was like, man, they are not having a real conversation. And that's kind of where I interjected. And again, this was a small room of 100 people. So it ended up extending into, an at the moment conversation of what the future of NAR might look like and some of the issues and flaws that I've been highlighting. But how we got connected was shortly thereafter, you and I shook hands, had a conversation, and said, hey, one day we're going to have this conversation on a podcast so we can go deep. And obviously that day's today. And I just appreciate, you saying, hey, let's talk this through. Let's go, have a drink here while we're in Park City, talk it through, and then end up doing a podcast together. So I just want to appreciate that part of it. A lot of people would have run from that conversation. Have some handlers say, oh, he's too busy. He's got to go freshen up in the hotel room. Lots of meetings. That's been the story with NAR for a long time. Lots of meetings, very busy people. We're all busy. I'm running two businesses. Everybody's busy. So I appreciate you for taking the time. And I'd love for you to just give a little bit of background because you have an extensive background, and then we're going to get into it.
Of course. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And this is why I'm here, and this is what I want us to be doing in this new era of NAR, is to really engage in these conversations, answer the questions people have about what NAR is doing, how this transformation that Nykia started a couple of years ago now is going, and we obviously have this new strategic plan, new direction for the consumer ad campaign, which we can dig into today. But no, really appreciate the chance to have the conversation, and we're open for business when it comes to having conversations like this, and so something that we really want to be doing a lot more of. To answer your question on my background, so I've been at NAR for about 8 months. So new kid on the block on the executive team, hired by Nykia alongside her kind of transformation and shakeup of the leadership and of the team at NAR. I've been in media, marketing, communications, public affairs for about 20 years. Kind of most interesting / random thing on my resume, I was the co-founder and early stage CMO of Hinge, the dating app. Was started by my best college friend and college roommate, Justin McLeod, who's still the founder and CEO. So got to work on a startup, got to work on a consumer startup, got to work on a digital building an app from the ground up. So really fascinating experience. Before that, I started out my career on the agency side. So worked on social media and digital campaigns and PR and all that kind of stuff in Washington for a lot of different clients in the association space, especially. So worked with folks like AARP and API, which is the energy industry trade association, and pharma and some others. Never had NAR as a client, but did a lot of work in that association world. I was also at Politico for about a decade, so the big political media company, helped them run and launch a number of different businesses. Moved to Brussels for a couple of years to launch Politico Europe. Came back and helped them run a creative studio called Politico Focus. Worked at Google for a little while, kind of the beginning of the AI boom. I led policy marketing for Google, so helped Google tell its story in Washington to policymakers, and then also helped a startup called Semaphore, which is a great kind of new FT media company, launch in Washington and build its DC bureau. So been doing a lot of different things at this intersection of media, marketing, communications, policy for about 20 years, and really excited to be at NAR. I think a tremendous opportunity to get back to the business of serving our members, and was really excited to work with Nykia, fellow media veteran, having come from the Chicago Sun-Times, where she was CEO, and an amazing leader, and I think exactly what NAR needed to shake things up and really bring a modern, disciplined, exciting approach to the future of the association.
Well, thank you for that. Because if you haven't had a chance to meet Bennett, or you haven't taken the time to dig into the changes that Nykia is leading on the executive team, then you just might have missed how much of a background that you have. And so you do have an extensive background. You're not tainted, hopefully, by a lot of the mistakes that NAR has made in the past. And you are potentially going to bring in a new, clear, relevant, refreshed vision. Okay, my biggest issue with communications and marketing at NAR is and has been for quite some time our contract with Havas Media Group. That's one of the big 6 monster media conglomerates in the world, not just in the country. You know this, but I'll remind the listeners. And we don't have, the last year's data, but we have data going all the way back on what we've spent. And I just want to read through it so that if you haven't been paying attention, you've got the numbers. Okay. So in 2024, Havas was the highest paid independent contractor from NAR at $43 million. Okay. Years prior to that, this was years of we've done here with Havas, 45 million, 46 million. If you go to 2020, that was only 10.6 million, but 2019 was 71 plus million, 38 million, 37 million, 37 million, going all the way back to 2016. Before Havas, there was an organization called the Most Organization. They were paid in a similar range, 23 million, 34 million, 35 million, 34 million, 38 million in their 5 years of having this contract before Havas. Havas isn't the only independent contractor that we're paying. There's Cobalt, which you could walk us through, obviously, what their role is. But Cobalt Media Group has been paid in the past anywhere from, call it 2 million to upwards almost of 5 million in 2019. Havas is a marketing and communications group. Their work that they've done from when they took over from the Most Organization, call it 2016 to when you've taken over, to me and many others, has not landed. It has not made any impact with consumers. Consumers went out and sued the crap out of us as an industry. So if anything, you could argue that it made the opposite impact of intended, of holding the value of the realtor high in consumers' minds. Yet today, we're still pumping out tens of millions of dollars to Havas Marketing Group. We're still working with them. I'd like to start with, why are they the right partner for our association?
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's helpful too to ground ourselves in sort of the history here and like the core question: why does NAR do this, right? And so the answer to that is that members wanted and voted for this starting back in 1998. Was the first year of the NAR membership and board of directors voting to start a public awareness campaign to drive interest and preference for working with a realtor, right? And kind of looking for that realtor R next to the name of their real estate representation. And so each year that is reviewed, renewed. That budget that you mentioned with Havas and others is a special assessment. So of those $201 per realtor member that fund NAR, $45 of that is a special assessment specifically voted on and designated for the consumer ad campaign. So that's the origin story and kind of how this all got started.
It's the board that voted. Just to be clear, you said members voted, but that's the board representing the members, which should have made that vote.
Yeah.
Yep.
So but let's dig into it a little bit. So I obviously have been here for 8 months, so I can speak, most completely about this year's campaign and last year's campaign, which I'd love to dig into. We are really trying to create that opportunity for consumers to understand what realtors are, who realtors are, what is represented in that membership, code of ethics, but also I think really like you see in other industries with other brands, like say a certified financial planner, really associate that realtor designation with the gold standard in the industry. And so that's really been our goal of the campaign, is our goal of the campaign this year. Havas is primarily a media buying agency. And so that's true. Havas has been the creative agency on the campaign in the past. That's the distinction, who's making the ads and who is placing the ads. So today we work with a smaller independent agency called Uncommon Brand Studio on the creative, and Havas is our media buyer. So 95+% of those budget numbers that you're seeing in the 990 with Havas are going towards buying ads, right? So those are not being paid as fees. Those are going out back towards Facebook, Instagram.
Havas is essentially at a 5% service fee, maybe some other upfront money.
Yeah, and those we can. I'd be happy to rabbit hole on like media business economics and business models if you want to, but the depending on the placement, some are flat fee, some are commission. So there's a handful of different models that are sort of blended into the way that that's approached. What I'm really excited about and what I wanted to do taking over, given the moment that NAR is in, right, post settlement. With these settlement payments each year, huge, as you mentioned, outcry from members and from consumers to see real financial discipline in the industry and real transparency at NAR. What I wanted to do was continue to deliver on the remit that we were given, by members to have this consumer ad campaign, this public awareness campaign, but to do that in the most cost-effective, most trackable, optimizable, measurable way humanly possible, and really use the latest tools, the latest data, the latest AI solutions that we could access to be able to do that. And so, to go back to your question of, why is Havas the right fit for NAR? I think that today, and again, I can speak to the last 8 months and what I've been able to oversee, but today we have access to audience tools, targeting tools that, quite simply, if we were to do this campaign by ourselves, we wouldn't have access to. We would be advertising to the wrong people, and we'd be advertising in places that might not reach the right people and make the proper impact. And so, just to double click on that for a quick minute, as we're developing this year's campaign, we wanted to get a lot more precise about when do people actually make a decision and inform who they're working with as their, as their real estate professional, as their, agent to navigate that, that home buying or selling process. Homed in on first-time home buyers as being the place where you can really influence that the most. And that was based on consumer research. It won't surprise you to hear that, if you have a positive experience with your, real estate professional, with your realtor or otherwise, you'll likely stay with them, more than half the time for a, future transaction. Certainly if you're in the same area and things like that. So really that first-time home buyer is the most important audience for us. We wanted to take that a lot further because obviously, even for a first-time home buyer, there are times where you're too early in the process to really be thinking about, who am I going to be working with, or you're too late in the process because you've already made that decision. So we worked with Havas to benchmark 48 different consumer behaviors across the course of the home buying process. And using that to narrow in, those are all targetable behaviors, meaning that thanks to the massive ecosystem that the kind of online advertising universe is, you can take certain behaviors and use them to target people online, and especially now through things like connected TV and social media and things of that nature. So we were able to not just target first-time home buyers, which is our most valuable audience, but actually target a subsegment of them that are really ripe in this sweet spot for saying, who am I going to work with? And I am really beginning to want to take action on that decision. So to kind of overgeneralize a little bit, but the slice and the behaviors that we ended up in was really, when are folks moving from that early exploration phase of maybe, browsing a Zillow or a Realtor.com, but not doing it as actively towards going out and seeing a house and writing an offer. But you're on a portal, you're looking at listings multiple times within the last 30 days, but you either have not or are just about to begin to consider getting pre-approved for a mortgage. So across those 48 different consumer behaviors across that home buying process, we were able to subsegment that 4 or so million first-time home buyers that the U.S. has each year into a subsegment of that of actually less than 1 million of them that are most ripe for educating themselves on who they might want to use as an agent in the buying process. And so that we quite simply could not have done that without a world-class data empowered, tech enabled, kind of AI first agency like Havas. And so we were able to really, I think, ramp up the effectiveness of the campaign in a way that we've never done before. So I'm excited that we're targeting fewer people because it means we're making a bigger difference with those people. Okay, we did the same thing. Sure, go ahead.
No, I mean, there's a ton of interesting stuff in there, and I want to touch on some of it. And thank you for that answer. I do want to I don't want to harp on this, but I want to double click on, we are using a media group that we've used for multiple years. And can you acknowledge that you can't change the mistakes of the past? We both would agree on that, but can you acknowledge that where you started by saying, and I want this as much as you want it. I want this as much as Nykia and other members that are very involved in NAR want realtors to be seen as an elevated profession by consumers. Okay. I think we all agree on that. And that's where you started by saying, this is important, but we have to acknowledge, okay, that the leaders before you started here 8 months ago, before Nykia took over, were saying almost exactly the same things about why we contracted Havas Media Group, or however you say it. I'm not fancy enough to be working with the 6th largest media group in the world, but who's headquartered in Paris. But previous NAR executives, as directed by the board, the voting board members, which we have way too many people on this board to begin with. I'm sure that gives Nykia a lot of headaches. They voted for this engagement. Okay. but we've been consistently using the same company and saying the same thing. We want to elevate the group. Now, I think some of the tactical approaches that you're talking about based on your experience is definitely way more advanced than what we've seen from an NAR executive on how they're looking at, okay, we've got 48 different behaviors and we want to place the ads in front of the right people at the right time. You know, you don't want to place an ad in front of somebody who just bought a home 30 days ago. That makes a lot of sense. But we're using the same group and using a very similar talk track of why we've contracted. Is that because we have a directive that is off from the board, so it sounds very similar from the past? And how are we going to really ensure that it lands this time? I get the 48 consumers, the 48 behaviors, and we're going to go, you can go deeper on that. But the messaging seems to be the same from the past. And I think that's where just the everyday member is going to hear something like that and say, nothing's changed.
Let me address, I appreciate the feedback. Let me address a couple of the pieces. I think one, the messaging platform this year is completely different from anything we've ever done before. And would love to show one of the ads at some point if you want to pull one up.
Yeah, we're gonna, because we have the ads, and we're gonna show one or two of those here on the pod. So these are the new ads that Bennett, I'm gonna say that you've led with the creative group, which is Uncommon Creative Studio, Global Branding. They were paid $8 million in 2024, along with obviously the media group to place these ads. I'm sure you were the lead on it from the NAR side on these ads.
Yeah, I was this year, obviously, right?
On this year, on these ads. Yeah. And you're still using Uncommon on the creative. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're using Uncommon.
But I will say, just to circle back on that though, like we've taken a completely different creative direction already. Even just in the past 3 days since we launched the campaign, I've gotten a dozen texts and emails from brokers, agents, realtors, folks that I know and folks that I don't know, right? Members who, sent me an email unprompted saying, I finally feel like this campaign reflects all that I do, reflects the hard work that I put into serving my clients. And thank you for taking this fresh approach. And so that was, it's obviously anecdotes, but really excited to hear that kind of feedback from our membership.
Were those texts the members that you're receiving this positive feedback from? And again, we're going to look at these ads that Bennett's referencing. The ones that were these supportive texts, they must have been comparing it to something like the We Are campaign. Mm-hmm. How did we fail so miserably on the We Are campaign when we had the same group placing these ads? They weren't the creative Havas. But where did we fail? I don't know if Uncommon was the group on the We Are campaign. You can tell me if they were.
They weren't. No, Uncommon has just worked with us this year and last year on the Right by You campaign, which we kicked off.
Well, they were paid $8 million in 24. So this year in 26, last year in 25, and then they were paid $8 million. They did something in 24.
No, the development of the 2025 campaign.
Okay, I got you. So they were working on the 25 campaign in 24. Got it. Why did the We Are campaign fail so miserably in the past?
Two thoughts there. Obviously beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I was not here overseeing those campaigns, but I can speak to a few pieces of them. For today's campaign and a big shift, and you mentioned you work closely with friends with James Dwiggins. I was on their podcast earlier this week. Something that James and Keith said, I'll reference here because I thought it was an interesting point, which was, how can we shift away from really just focusing on that R and focusing on that kind of realtor pin and realtor brand and realtor logo, and actually focus on what does a realtor do for a living, and what do clients not always see behind the scenes, that it actually creates a huge aha moment understanding of how valuable great real estate representation can be. And that's the biggest shift, I think, is focusing less on looking for the R, and that being kind of a call to action that NAR has used in the past, to really focusing, as we did in this campaign, of how much realtors do for their clients, of really dialing in on professionalism, on ethics, on expertise. The tagline of the campaign is focused on how realtors and agents who are realtors do more than open doors. And we really wanted to take that stereotype that, real estate agents and realtors are just bringing people to listings and showings. You all know, and the amazing work that you're doing with your sales classes and everything else, how hard realtors work. Nykia has a great kind of call to arms for us, which is that we need to match our members' hustle. And I totally agree with that and believe that, because our members are some of the hardest working, forget about real estate professionals, just professionals in general, right? I mean, entrepreneurs, as Kevin Sears likes to say, realtors wake up every morning unemployed and have to rebuild that business for that next transaction. So we wanted to reflect that. And I think that that's where we're going to be successful. It's a tricky balance because this is a consumer ad campaign. So you want to make sure that the consumer sees themselves in that campaign so that they identify with it, so we can create behavior change, right? We're trying to create awareness. We're trying to create preference. We're trying to drive leads, right? The campaign all directs back to a landing page that has a realtor.com powered search to find an agent who's a realtor, in your neighborhood. And that was really important. And so balancing that with certainly still making the campaign about that consumer first-time homebuyer journey, showing those moments, showing that kind of house tour experience, but through it, and using that trope of kind of opening doors through a showing to just show how hard realtors work and everything they do above and beyond just that moment in the showing to really show up and deliver for their clients.
Yeah. And so here's a kind of a framework to think this through for everybody listening. Bennett said earlier about 25% of our dues are going to this media spend. And that's because the board of NAR voted for this back in 1998. Okay. So think about like when
the vote and it's revisited and kind of revoted.
And it's been revisited. No. But to your point, it started in 98 and it's been continuously put through, meaning, if you're wondering why your taxes are so high in your state, well, the people you voted in over the years in that particular state have created policies that have created high taxes for you. So it's like, it's the people you're voting in that are making the decisions around taxing the heck out of you.
Those taxes could be a whole lot higher if it weren't for NAR advocacy, just to have a shameless plug here.
I'm just, any tax, right?
We've defeated 11 tax proposals over the past decade that represent $2.3 trillion in more taxes on the industry. And so just think about how crushing that tax weight would be if it weren't for NAR's leadership on the advocacy.
I agree that the work Shannon does, the advocacy group is amazing. So when we look at the finger to blame, and I'm going to ask you later, a question about particularly, not particularly about the board, but where is the finger to blame on 25% of the money being spent over the years on really bad campaigns? We are our Super Bowl commercials who haven't stood up to, not even the top half of Super Bowl commercials. We're certainly in the bottom 10 percentile of interesting Super Bowl commercials. It would be our own board. Okay. And then, now looking forward, we have Bennett, who's going to be working closely with these groups for new creative, but also ensuring that the placement of the ads are put into the right place. And so that's kind of where we are today. And so time is obviously going to tell, but we have the ads that Bennett has worked on with these vendor partners. And I want to show at least two of them. Bennett, we're going to show the hero spot, the one. Is there another one on the list you think we should show after that? Whether it's the negotiation, the closing, the arcade, which one would you want to go to after that? I want to show two.
I think negotiation is a fun one. It's shorter. It's 15 seconds kind of thing you might see.
So let's show the one hero spot, and then we'll go into the negotiation. We're going to show two ads that are brand new. These are just released to consumers now.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Started running yesterday earlier this week on Tuesday, February 24th.
Just started on Tuesday. So Bobby, if you can share those.
This is the one.
What about adding an addition?
We need to check the zoning. Plans? I added a contingency. Upgrade needed? Mm-hmm. Property line ends here. Closing's back on. Let's sign.
Can we still close on time?
Oh, I know a lender who can help.
Will it clear on schedule? Great. Ready?
So I love both of these. Okay. I mean, they're well done. So I guess shout out to you and Uncommon Creative Studio on the creative direction. Like, they're good commercials. They're good spots. They're much better than the We Are from a creative standpoint. Okay. So I'm cool with that. I know why James Dwiggins loved them, because it's very much in line with a problem he's trying to solve with Raise. Like showcasing, that hero spot showcases all the different things that an agent does, the unseen obstacles that an agent is jumping through, and just work. And that's why Raise is so powerful. It's like showing the work that is being done that is either taken for granted or just the story isn't told to a customer. So I think they're really well done. So congratulations on that. Now,
well, thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
If we look within our industry, CoStar through their homes.com portal has done a good job on creative with the ads that they've put out some creative commercials, and they've placed it on mega spots like the Super Bowl and other placements, right? They've spent $1 billion over the last handful of years, every single year on these campaigns. And now they've said, whoa, it hasn't worked. We haven't cracked into Realtor.com and Zillow. They've got pressure from some of their investor groups, that is now pressuring them to get back to core competency on commercial. And they've now put out to investors, because they're a publicly traded company, you can see all this stuff, that, hey, we're going to be scaling back on $1 billion spend and going to be landing somewhere, at the end of this decade, maybe at $500 million. Okay. Still a lot of money. Okay. But they had great creative commercials and they had great placement. How are we going to be different from, they just tried to beat what I would say are two of the biggest brands in our industry, Zillow and Realtor.com. They just tried to compete, essentially have admitted they didn't get very far. How are we going to get very far with our spend and these creative placements that I would agree are very, very well done?
Well, I think the goal is fundamentally different, right? And I think that, and obviously I'm the CMO at NAR, not at CoStar or Realtor.com or those other folks. So I can only speak from kind of an arm's length, but changing, digital consumer behavior at that core portal website app level is really hard. And I think that is what you're seeing there. And that's true of, look at Bing and Google over the years, right? Like this is something that you see frequently in that digital internet ecosystem of when there is, when there are dominant players, it can be really challenging for other websites, and apps to break in there. And so I think that's really the phenomenon that you're seeing play out in that universe. For us, we have a fundamentally different goal. Like our goal is not to make, the NAR website as, more visited than homes.com or something like that. Far from it. Our goal is simply to say, if you are a first-time home buyer who is looking into buyer agency and who should you work with to go and buy a house, that we want that realtor designation to mean something to you, because it does mean something and it represents that professionalism in the industry, and that we are doing right by our members if we are able to create that consumer preference. And the good news is, and again, I can only really speak to in deep depth, last year's campaign and this year's. When we looked at last year's campaign, 87% of consumers who saw that campaign were more likely to work with a realtor than they were before, right? And those are standard kind of brand awareness studies that you do with a segment of people who have seen ads and not seen ads before they saw it, after they saw it, things like that. So continuing to measure that consumer preference and consumer awareness, as well as just drive leads back to members through that landing page for the campaign, where you now have a search integration with realtor.com is where I think we can make a difference for our members.
So maybe let's dig into the lead side, because I'd like to put some of the surveys to the side, because surveys can be misleading. I mean, the greatest example would be the last election. Every poll said one thing, the whole thing went another way. So everybody was very confused. They were very smart people coming out with lots of polls, and they were wrong. So we can do a lot of surveys that speak to what we want them to say, or a lot of focus groups. I'd like to understand if we're not driving, like the reason I brought up CoStar and Homes is because their investors can see you're not getting enough sticky traffic to the website, which is bringing in revenue for homes.com. And now we need to reduce this spending and focus on core competency with commercial, because the revenue is telling us a story. Now, we're obviously, NAR is not collecting revenue from consumers. So it's going to be a little bit different for us here. But outside of, groups that we're studying or surveys, you're talking about some leads. Walk me through the leads and walk me through other measurements that you're going to use to say, this is working. What the board wants, greater awareness. It's not just a billboard where we're debating the creativeness of a billboard. I mean, if we want to be the best at billboard awareness, we can talk to Gary Ashton down in down in Nashville. He's great at billboards, but that's a small town, and he's put his face everywhere, and it's certainly worked for his business. But if I were to ask him to quantify it and track it for me, it might be a little bit more difficult. Now, he uses tracking numbers and all that. Like, how are we going to track this stuff?
Yeah, really. I mean, the short answer
working?
is really aggressively. And look, I'd love to come back, this time next year, end of this year, when we've really sort of diagnosed the campaign, see how it's done, and go through all those numbers. They could be really interesting. Couple of things to ground us in how we're setting ourselves up for success this year. First, really, as I mentioned this briefly earlier, but really focused on measurable, optimizable, targetable channels. So no more broadcast TV, no more radio, print, nothing that we can't track and target and measure and optimize are we running anymore. So that was a big shift. In the past, things like broadcast TV and radio, and as you mentioned, things like billboards, out of home were a part of the media mix. They are not in 2026. And for me, that was about being able to come on here, with folks like yourself, but every member that I meet, and feel really good about every dollar of member dues dollars that are going toward this campaign. I want to be able to tell you, which I can now, which I'm really excited about, that this is going exactly to who we want, where we want it. On where we want it, another piece, and frankly, another thing that we wouldn't be able to accomplish without the scale and data and AI tools of a media agency like Havas, we were able to use a kind of big data asset that they've developed across all of their campaigns. We were able to benchmark against 9,000 different ad campaigns, not just platforms like a TikTok or an Instagram or a Facebook, but individual placements within those platforms, and look at, for the kind of attention that we need to get to be able to change a behavior, right? Really getting very granular about, all right, this kind of ad needs to be seen for X numbers of seconds on Instagram and Y numbers of seconds on YouTube in order for that consumer in our target audience to make a change, for it to really, resonate with them. So we were able to benchmark that against 9,000 other campaigns, so that every placement that we're buying, and again, it's specific. Like we will advertise, at the beginning of a Hulu show, not at the end, or in a particular, square placement on Instagram, not a story, or those are obviously illustrative examples, but because we have this granular level of intelligence and benchmarking all these placements. So both on the audience side of things, on just the media selection generally, and then on the individual ads that we're buying, we have turned the dial all the way up to 11 to make sure that these are going to be as cost effective and efficient as possible. So I think that was crucial for us to be really effective and efficient moving forward. And it'll also allow us to optimize throughout the course of the year, right? Where this is not a set it and forget it campaign, far from it. We are going to keep a close eye on every one of these ads. As we showed, 2 ad creative examples. We've got a couple more. We've got some, social specific placements. We will continually dial up and down that media mix to make sure that we are being as cost effective and as cost efficient as we can throughout the course of the year. So a lot of measurement going into that. Lead gen, really important, because at the end of the day, we want to help realtors thrive in their day-to-day business, and there's no better way that we can do that than connecting them with clients. So really, building that connection back to find a realtor search experience on realtor.com was crucial in doing that. And so that's a core part of our kind of landing page experience for the campaign this year as well. So yeah, we will measure consumer awareness, we'll measure consumer preference, we'll measure really specific like campaign placement by placement performance. And then also we'll measure leads and see, which ads are sending more people to search and find a realtor.
So Tom, I'm going to let you jump in here a second. I've been waiting years for,
we're friends here, Byron. I know I'm all good, man.
For these questions to be answered. So,
Bennett, I'm excited to do it. And honestly, like that is what this new generation and new leadership of NAR represents. Like we want to have these conversations and we want to have as much, we want to have ultimate transparency around these things because your feedback's important. And look, Byron, I would love to have you on the consumer communications committee at NAR someday because you're passionate about this stuff.
No, I'd love to do it. And
signed up right now. That's committed. Just get them to sign.
I feel like
there is an application process. We could do some vetting there. So we'll get that started.
Yeah, there's enough. You can vet me out. There's enough about me out there. I've been fasting for like 2 years, so now I'm just like completely gorging myself. All right. I would imagine you said, hey, no to print and no to this stuff that we can't track. And I like that you're not just going off of impressions. You're like, hey, what's the retention inside of these? And we're going to get really in the weeds on these campaigns. So I love everything you're saying there. I would imagine Nykia's experience with print that, I mean, you're head of communications and marketing, so maybe, but she's also from marketing. Maybe you guys don't agree on everything, but I would imagine that, hey, there's a lot of agreement here. I'm going to assume that she agrees, and maybe because of her past experience, that print is essentially dead for what we're trying to accomplish. Or am I kind of reading into that too much?
Yeah, no, it's funny. She and I talk every day, and she's an amazing leader. We haven't spent a lot of time explicitly talking about print media, but what we have talked about is everything else we just discussed, which is how can we get to a place where we feel 100% strong and good about where every dollar of this campaign is going.
Yeah.
And that is a commitment. We are committed to transparency, and that is not just a shiny talking point on the shiny, and thank you for appreciating the design of our annual report, but it's not just a talking point in things like our strategic plan, our annual report. Like we want to back that up. And that's why we want to be able to have conversations like this and go line by line into what we're doing. But no, Nykia is a phenomenal leader. She's currently wrapping up a chief AI officer program at the University of Chicago, which is keeping her busy in nights and weekends. And so she, like a lot of our leaders, have a voracious appetite for staying on top of technology and innovation. And that comes back into our work, right? We want to be using that to make things like this campaign more effective and more targeted, and just continually every day get better at delivering on what our members expect from NAR.
I look forward to one day, hopefully getting to sit down with Nykia, do a proper in-person pod, and then maybe having her on conversations like this on a more consistent basis. I hope we get to that place. I do love the design of the annual report. as you mentioned. Somebody spent a lot of time on that. Tom, I'm going to let you jump in. I got one more question. I want to get off of this, and we're going to obviously see how the ads play out moving forward. As we're like, some of the mistakes that we've made in the past, I kind of just want to put a pin in this whole conversation. Some of the mistakes that NAR has made in the past, around our, we're always trying to solve for this external perception, how consumers perceive us. Is that the problem really? Like, we keep trying to get a better campaign, doing better work on tracking these campaigns, and I know you've got limited time here in the association, but is the problem this external perception truly, or is it in fact our internal standards, our internal board, the standard of how easy it is to get into these kind of standards that we've kind of come to know as normal? And obviously, if it's not easy to get in, there's either a higher due or a lot less members. But, we have a huge divide, okay? Because everything that Compass Now Anywhere / Compass CIH is doing would go against a lot of the things that NAR has always stood for. So we have internal divide, internal conflict. Mm-hmm. And so is it our own internal standards that's the biggest problem in your view? Or is it this external perception that consumers have?
I think that we need to be doing things better on every front. And that's why we have a really comprehensive strategic plan. Obviously, we've gone deep on the consumer ad campaign. We have 8 big commitments to the industry that play out in about 24 different strategic initiatives. Each of those has projects and milestones under it. The consumer ad campaign only represents one of those 24 different initiatives. So there's things like, building a legal leadership forum so that we're able to, have more, conversations and, engagement across leaders in the legal space, right? We have an amazing new general counsel, John Wachowski, who has done a tremendous job leading the legal team for the past year and a half or so. And there's work like that happening on every corner of the association. You touched on a couple of really important things. Looking at governance, making sure that the right people are getting into and just getting awareness and education on if they're ready to have, like yourself, a vocal opinion about consumer communications. Like, every person who has that kind of passion should know exactly what to do with it. And that's my job, right, on the communication side, but also working with our partners who work more closely on our governance structure and things like that to make sure that we're improving standards, we're raising the bar of professionalism across every corner of the association. So it is really an all hands on deck moment. I mean, there's a reason why Nykia brought in 80% of her executive team now is new, right? We have trimmed headcount by about 14% across the association. But in doing that, we've turned over about a third of the talent at the association. So there's a lot of new people, a lot of people that I'm really proud that we hired because they're world-class and they're showing up every day to try to do this stuff better for NAR's members. And so the short answer to your question is it's all the above. Like, we are working hard across every corner of the association to raise standards of professionalism, to modernize the association, to improve and build this future member experience, because at the end of the day, we also want it to be easy to get what you want and need from the association, whether that's education, whether that's understanding of a new technology resource, whether that's just doing your code of ethics training, right? All those things should be easier to do, easier to access, easier to navigate, better communication, better use of data, all the things. So, I mean, we're all hands on deck on this, and that's why it's truly a transformation of the association. I think we've got the right people in place to do it.
Yeah. Well, that was a great answer. I know you can't blame us because that wouldn't be good for your future, but we need to hold each other accountable. The NAR board has had a high level of incompetency for a long period of time. And it's because we just have way too many members. And if we had 12 really smart people instead of 1,000 average people on the board, we might get a little bit more done. But Tom, where do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, so you talked about a lot of stuff here, Bennett. And again, I give you a lot of credit for coming on, because this is not something that's happened before. So that hopefully is a sign of things to come here. You know, I've got real estate family. I've got some. My dad's been doing this for a while, and when you talk about turning over an organization, I don't think it's easy to do. So, how does NAR intend to get some fresh leadership in here? How do they intend to not be in this box of taking care of their own with previous regimes? What are they doing to develop leaders right now and actively seeking people out? I mean, I think that's question number one. And then the second follow-up I got to that is, you got this plan. There's 24 initiatives and 75 projects. I don't know about you. Every business book I've read said you need like 3 things to focus on. So it seems like an awful lot to be taking down. How do you prioritize that? Because I mean, and how are you bringing people in to do that? Because that's an awful lot to do in 2 years. I got 3 goals at my company, Byron. I don't know about you, but that's kind of how we operate.
I got
and to be clear,
every 90.
Yeah, we've got 2 goals, right? We have 2 goals. Those commitments, those projects, those initiatives are the how, right? It's those are the pieces to the puzzle. But we have 2 goals. Our goals are to modernize the association. We want to get to a place where, as I've mentioned for my corner of the world, marketing and communications, but it's true on every corner, we want you to feel great about every decision that we're making, every penny of your dues dollars that's spent on finance, on legal, on technology, all the things, right? So I think modernizing the association is crucially important. But even more important is our goal of building a better future member experience. And that is across the entire universe of NAR's efforts and our work. And so, that's how we do it, Tom. I mean, those, getting down into those brass tacks, and why I mentioned all those different initiatives and projects isn't because we're, distracted or pulled in different directions. There are different leaders across the company, different teams within teams that are responsible for a building block that's going to allow us to modernize the association, going to allow us to build that member experience that folks, enjoy and appreciate and feel good about in the future. So that's how we're going to approach that. One of those projects and one of those goals that really straddles both of those really is what you touched on, which is building the next generation of future realtors and of future NAR leaders, both of which are crucially important. And so we are working on those projects right now. My colleagues in industry relations and on our leadership resources team and others are working on how do we take things like the young professional networks that exist around the country and grow them? How do we create better content, better storytelling, so it's really super simple and easy to understand? Why does NAR do anything, right? What is the rule-making process look like? How does something, get deliberated at a committee and then go to a board vote? If I want something to change at NAR, what the heck do I do? Where do I go, right? And so all of those things are questions that we want to answer because we want to create a place, one, that's attractive to a great next generation of future leaders, and 2, that people really understand how all this works. And so, you're dead on. We need to be building that leadership pipeline into the future so that great, young, dynamic, innovative, leading realtors want to kind of pick up a shovel and be a part of NAR leadership. And so we're working hard on it.
So what's the process for somebody? Because I've reached out to our local boards and said, hey, I want to get involved, and literally get no response. So if someone says they want to do that, what kind of pipeline's being developed? Because what we've seen in the past, and again, you haven't, is that it's very closed off. It's like, well, you're either part of the club or you're not, and that's been something that I've run into, that I know peers of mine have run into. How does that happen? Because it seems very difficult to get on the inside of NAR, or even some of the local boards.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. And obviously, I work at NAR, so I can't speak as much to your experience at the state or local level.
Sure, I'm not asking you to.
But for us, honestly, I think the best way to start is to identify your passion area and then apply to join a committee. because I think that's really the best way to start. And so, as we mentioned, we have a consumer communications committee that works with us hand in glove on this campaign. We had one of those members, our chair, Gia Arvin in Gainesville, Florida, amazing realtor, really cool lady. She was on set with us on these shoots, literally changing things, saying, "Hey, in that shot, a realtor wouldn't say that. Like this is how that transaction goes down, or we need to make sure that the title attorney's in the room for this part of the closing and things like that." So there's really cool levels of engagement for the folks on these committees. So I think that from an NAR perspective, that's the opportunity, and that exists in finance and in advocacy and in all of these different areas, technology, like all of these different areas of NAR's work. So I think that's a great opportunity, and happy to provide some links so we can put in the show notes. We're also working on some
great
explainer videos and just easier to navigate web pages where, like, if you want to do that, if you want to volunteer, if you want to apply to look into something and understand those different committee structures and what they do, we want to make all that easier to access and easier to navigate, which is also crucially important to just reducing the friction and the barriers. So like you said, Tom, the last thing you ever want is to have somebody raise their hand because they're excited to help and not be able to connect them with the best place to get that input. So that's something that we're really focused on improving.
Yeah, please send those.
Yeah, and because any great company, they got to, and NAR is a company fundamentally, they have to develop leadership or they're going to have a problem. So I think that's, and you look at the average age of real estate agents, they're like 57 years old. So anyone that's in their 40s, like that should be someone I would imagine you get excited about. So
yeah, one of the most inspiring corners, honestly, of the community are our young professional networks, YPN. They exist in just about every corner of the country. We have national gatherings of those folks and those young leaders in those groups at our annual events and gatherings, and it's really exciting to see because you see exactly what you're describing, Tom. You see folks in their 20s and 30s saying, "I want to be a part of making sure this industry and this profession are headed in the most professional, most successful direction possible."
That's good to hear. So I guess the last question I got is obviously, we've seen what's happened with NAR with Nykia, right, coming in and what's happened with Kevin Sears and some of the controversy that's there. What's NAR doing to police themselves now with their current leadership to make sure that's not going to happen again? Because this is like the last thing you'd want to see happen. And I think there is still a closed door mentality among people. I can speak to you from a team side. And Byron, I don't know if you ran into this, but when the lawsuits were going on, people are like, "Hey, how can we disassociate? How can we do it? They're not helping us here." So what are you doing to better vet the people that are getting involved in leadership to making sure they've got the right integrity to lead the organization?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think it's two things. I think it's about, on one level, collaboration, coordination, communication, and on another level, quite specifically, raising those standards. And so, one thing that we're working on, right now is things like the application process, the qualifications to, serve on committees or serve in leadership, and making sure that those standards are really high. So it's quite literally improving and changing how those things happen and how those things work. And that work's underway. And that is it's another building block of modernizing the association, building that better future member experience. So that's one piece. The other piece, I think, is just we have a level of, and again, I've been here for 8 months, so I can't speak to what things were like beforehand. But we meet with our volunteer leadership team every week. And that's the entire C-suite of NAR meeting with, Kevin Brown, who's now the board president, and Christine Hansen, who's our president-elect for next year, Colin Lane, who's our first vice president, and a number of other folks. And so there is a level of transparency, of accountability, of communication, anything anybody's hearing, things that we can be helpful with each other, initiatives that are driven on the volunteer side that need some staff support, things that staff are working on that we need to make sure are really authentic from a realtor perspective. There's just a great level of coordination and collaboration and communication there. And so I think that is just naturally creates a really high accountability environment, which I think is good for the association and good for us continuing to really raise the professionalism standards in the industry.
Well, Bennett, it's been It's been awesome to have you on. And I really appreciate the time. The facts are, as has always existed and moving forward, there's really two groups you're trying to please. You're trying to please the members who are providing the revenue, the dollars to be able to put all this work forward. And then we're trying to, as NAR, we're also trying to speak to that consumer group. I've looked at what's worked in the past. The advocacy has, efforts have certainly outweighed to me the messaging efforts, but there's really two groups that you're trying to please. So it's not unlike, a broker leader out there who's like, man, I'm trying to please agents and I'm trying to speak to buyers, sellers, and investors where there's multiple, your message, all four of those messages, your message to the agent, to an investor, to a buyer, to a seller are different because they're all trying to solve a different problem. And, consumers are trying to solve a different problem than realtors are, but this is the National Association of Realtors, not of homeowners. So, I know there's a balance there and I know it's a lot of hard work. And I do appreciate that, this time that you've spent here is hopefully going to be on a continued open dialogue from the executive team, because I do want to, I want to have more involvement as opposed to just looking at it from the sideline and picking everything apart. It's easy to be, a Monday morning quarterback. It's really easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, Bennett, but I want it to work. And so, I'd love to have more dialogue. I'm of the belief if you're going to solve for making sure that the realtor community, the members who are paying the dues, I think it's really important that people like you and our new leader, Nykia, are doing as many of these as possible. This is the world we live in today. Okay. It's not 1995 anymore. We live in this world where people have an expectation, if this is our association, we're going to have access to the leader through as many, podcast conversations. And right now, NAR is on a campaign to win back. You have your biggest brokerage, Compass, CIH, saying you don't need NAR. So there is a full-on campaign that should be, full force ahead from NAR executives of speaking directly to potential members or current members. And so I hope that this is the start of consistency around this conversation. And I appreciate at least the start of it. And, if there's anything you want to leave the pod with, this first conversation with, the floor is yours.
No, thank you. And I first of all, I totally agree with you. And we are, out here. We're trying to have these conversations, answer tough questions, and get this kind of feedback because it's really useful feedback is the thing too. We're not just doing this to say that we did it. Like the conversations that you and I have, that we have on, platforms like this, we'll bring back and use it to inform, how we operate in the future. And so we're absolutely dedicated to doing that. That was one of the biggest things that I focused on when I started last summer. Last year, we did more than 400 interviews with media, with podcasts, across all different platforms. That's actually not the stat that I'm proud of. The stat that I'm proud of is that we issued 0 no comments when we're asked by anyone about NAR business. And that is not where NAR was in the past. There was, as I mentioned with James and Keith the other day, there was this, I think, a little bit more of a kind of bunker mentality, during, the settlement and those changes where so much was happening. No comment was more of the norm. That is not acceptable today for us to be able to be successful because we need to be accountable, we need to be transparent, and we need to be vocal. And so we'll continue to do that. We're going to try to show up, everywhere we can and answer and engage every one of our members that wants to have that conversation. We're surveying and focus grouping hundreds of thousands of people for that exact same reason, is to just have more dialogue and more feedback from as many of our members as we can reach. And so really appreciate the chance to talk with you guys. Love the opportunity, Byron, Tom, to get folks like yourselves more involved in NAR, because the more smart people we have that want to, pick up a shovel and help us build the future of the association, the better the association is going to be. So thanks again for having me on.
Well, thanks for your generosity in time here on the pod and just being willing to sit in here and answer some of the questions that have been burning for so long. We're going to put some of the links that we mentioned earlier in the description if you want to check those out, certainly in getting involvement. Talked a lot about, hey, you want to get involved in solving for affordability, get involved in local politics, literally. I mean, that's going to be probably the quickest path to affordability solves. And if we're going to fix NAR, getting some of the really smart people in our industry involved is going to be super helpful. So we'll put that in. Bennett, I know you're on the road. Appreciate the time. And thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks again, both of you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for checking out this week's Knowledge Brokers podcast. If you want to take what we're doing here at BAM and use it in your own business, join us over at School. We just switched BAMX into the #1 education and community platform. Go to school.com/BAMX or hit the link in the description, school.com/BAMX. I'll see you in the community.